So the idea is that you could use the survey data in 3 different ways. One is in planning and designing actually the cycling network, which will make cycling safe and fun. It could also be used in various kinds of community interventions, and we'll see what it means. And finally, it's also very valuable data that you can use in communicating these ideas, especially to build support for the cycling interventions that you're planning to do. Because do remember that it's great to see all the momentum, but there will be opposition. And when there is opposition, you do need to be prepared of how to leverage data and information and stories to build support and maintain the momentum for cycling. So here's the data. So, take the example, one of the cities that we had gotten the data from, and this is the split that we saw, that there was more men who had answered the survey than women. So I would urge you to think about ways in which you could actually get more female respondents to also take the survey, so that you would have a more fair understanding of what the situation is. Similarly, what we found was that the majority of answers, actually 88% of the answers, or the respondents, were in the bracket of 19 to 50 years. As in, of course, this bracket is a large bracket, but there is an inordinate number of people who are in this bracket right now who have responded, which means that we do not have enough data about people who are older than 50 or younger than 19. So again, reach out to respondents from other age groups, find out how you could get that in the city, right? So the goal is that you use this data to also inform how do you go ahead to get more of the right kind of data, which you can inform your planning process. Next, look at what kind of information that the data tells you. Amongst men, a large number, like over 90% of people actually, or men who responded, said that they know cycling fairly well. And a few of them, 4%, said not confident. But amongst women, the number of women who did not know how to cycle or were not confident was fairly large. Nearly 40% of women said they do not know either cycling or are not very confident about it, which means that the potential interventions need to focus on how do you start training programs for women, and how do you organize safe spaces for women to start learning and be confident to cycle. So think about how the survey information can be used for informing your own planning process for the interventions that you do. Another example, we asked, you asked your citizens to respond as to whether they own cycles or not, and what kind of purposes they use the cycles for. And in this particular case, what we found was that men have a higher access to cycle than women do. So we need to think about what's stopping women from having access to cycles. What can we do about it? How can we increase the number of men as well as women who have access to cycles? Second, we looked at the trip purpose, and we found, at least in this particular case, that the respondents were inordinately in the space of recreation and exercise, and not so much under the work or education trips, which is what daily trips tend to be. And therefore, we need to think about how do you reach out to respondents who actually cycle to work or school. So some of the examples which were given by Mr. Rajesh Pandya in Surat about how are they trying to be more inclusive about it and bringing all sections of the society along in being part of the planning process itself, rather than it being only a small set of people who are driving the planning process. Then we looked at the barriers to cycling, and this was one of the most important questions that you had asked in your survey. And in this particular case, these were the barriers which were identified by those who took the survey. And the survey information was also split amongst women and men. And what we found was, especially while the answers were quite similar amongst men and women were especially more concerned about being hit by speeding vehicles. They were very concerned about potholes and open drains. And they were also concerned about obstructions such as parked vehicles. And last but not the least, there was also a question of cycle parking, which was equally important for both men and women. Like about 40% of them said that was their concern. Now, this is key data that can inform the kind of actions that you can take. So if these are the 4 concerns, the potential interventions is you need to look at how do you make segregated cycle tracks so that there is a segregation between fast and slow moving vehicles. How do you traffic calm when segregation is not possible, to again make sure that it's safe to cycle. look at how can you improve the riding surface, what's stopping, like what are the potholes, what are the open drains, how can you make sure that they are addressed. And last, look at also how secure cycle parking can be a key component of the work that you do. Maybe this is an essential piece of work because citizens are concerned about secure parking for their cycles. The final piece, which is a really useful piece, especially from a communication perspective. So when we asked how often do you cycle, what we found was that only 6% of the respondents who had given the answer said that they cycle daily, while remaining people were only occasional users, such as maybe a few times a week or maybe only over the weekends. But 62% of them said they rarely or never cycle. But the same set of people said, when asked if there was better infrastructure, would you cycle? And the answers are there for you to see, right? 88% of them said yes, a resounding yes. And 11% of them said maybe, that maybe if you actually do it, we will do it, which means that nearly 100% of people are saying if cycling was safe and fun, we will cycle. And this is very, very useful information for you to make the case, whether it is to your political leaders or people who are detractors for your interventions, to build support. And the second piece is also look at a targeted campaign for women to take up cycling, because that's another piece in which you could take up. I would also like to point out, like some cities made some modifications to the survey, and that's very welcome. But sometimes those modifications don't exactly work. For example, one of the questions was, how often do you cycle? It was daily, few days a week, only weekends, rarely. And in this particular city's case, they also added the option of all of the above. Now, all of the above doesn't actually work because rarely and daily cannot go together, right? So do consider modifying, but with care, so that you don't have odd conditions of this kind.